Hello and welcome to News Central Television. I am Lekon Onobanjo. Here are some stories making rounds beyond the continent. We begin the news in Europe, where Russia's FSB security service on Friday said it has revoked the accreditation of 6 British diplomats in Moscow, whose actions, it said, showed signs of spying and sabotage work. Britain's embassy in Moscow did not immediately respond to a media request for comment. The primary agency that replaced the Soviet KGB, the FSB, claimed to have documents demonstrating that a British Foreign Office department in London, tasked with overseeing Eastern Europe and Central Asia, was coordinating the escalation of the political and military situation and making sure that Russia would lose its war against Ukraine strategically. Meanwhile, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has accused the West of being too afraid to discuss the possibility of helping Ukraine shoot down Russian missiles and drones, despite providing similar assistance to Israel. Zelensky's remark comes in the wake of Russian President Vladimir Putin's warning that Moscow would interpret any such move by NATO countries as direct involvement in a war against Russia. Amid ongoing Russian missile strikes and drone attacks, Kiev is urging its allies to use their territory to intercept the weapons, arguing that this would save Ukrainian civilian lives without risking Russian military casualties. And I'll tell you that Russian President Vladimir Putin has maintained that he will take the appropriate decisions based on the threats that they will face in response to the West's assertion that permitting Ukraine to launch long-range missiles into Russian territory would change the nature of the conflict. Putin's comments come as Kiev pressed the West to provide more powerful weapons with fewer restrictions as Russia continues its advance into eastern Ukraine.
И поэтому речь идет не о том, чтобы разрешать украинскому режиму наносить удары по России этим оружием или не разрешать. Речь идет о том, чтобы принять решение о том, что страны НАТО напрямую участвуют в военном конфликте или нет. Если это решение будет принято, это будет означать не что иное, как прямое участие стран НАТО, Соединенных Штатов, европейских стран в войне на Украине. А если это так, то, имея в виду изменение самой сути этого конфликта, мы будем принимать соответствующие решения, исходя из тех угроз, которыми нам будут.
Joining us on the news to discuss this is an international analyst, Bolu Michael. Bolu Michael, thank you so much for joining us on the news.
Thank you for having me.
All right. So what specific actions do you think President Putin is considering when he talked about crossing the red line in context of the Ukraine conflict?
Well, what he meant by a red line is the usage of long-range, missile, in the war. And he believes that the Ukrainian military do not have the capacity to operate the launching of this missile. And they would need the technical assistance of NATO countries to carry out their launch. So he believes that the fact that NATO is directly involved in the launching, in the acquisition and launching of this missile, it means there's a direct confrontation against Russia and its territorial integrity. So basically, I believe that Putin does not have the moral standard to caution NATO, being that he is acquiring the same type of weaponry from Iran. And the question to ask him in the delusion is if the case would have been different if Ukraine acquired these missiles from a non-NATO country and the Ukraine military are trained to launch the missile. Would his position be the same? Probably not, which means that Putin has a problem with NATO, not with Ukraine.
But he himself was actually crossed the red lines by attacking Ukraine, a sovereign state, unprovoked with offensives, and military actions in the country. So is it that him also doing what he's saying others should not do?
Yeah, that's what it means in essence. Evil must come with equity, must come with clean hands. He doesn't have the moral justification to caution NATO in any way, because he's possessing the same type of weaponry from Iran. So he's saying in essence that he has the right to acquire and launch this missile anytime he wants, but NATO or Ukraine does not have the capacity. That's like literally asking them to throw themselves under the bus and just giving to him in the war, which is very unlikely to happen.
So if Ukraine were to use Western long-range missiles to strike Russian territory, how do you think this will pan out? What form do you think this could escalate into?
Well, Putin has not especially said what his response will be, but he said he's going to take it as a direct confrontation by NATO against Russia. He didn't spell out exactly what his response will be, but it's not the first time that it's going to be spelling out threats against Western powers. When he invaded Ukraine in 2022, he mentioned that any country that comes against their special operation, that is the invasion of Ukraine, they would experience a retaliation like they've never seen before in their history. But nothing like that happened. The Western nations have been supplying Ukraine ever since. And Russia is just a country. They do not have the capacity, the military capacity to fight NATO on its own, because NATO is a combination of several powerful countries: USA, Canada, UK, France. They cannot fight even the USA alone by its military strength. So Russia knows that they do not have the capacity to actually fight NATO in any way. So I think what NATO will do is just ignore its threats, because they know that Russia, they do not have the capacity to fight them.
Okay, now, Russia has actually revoked the accreditation of 6 British diplomats, accusing them of spying. So do you think that this could be a coincidence?
I don't think it's a coincidence, because it's coming at the time when the British Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, is paying a visit to President Joe Biden. And one issue that is, crucial, that is big on the table, is the use of long-range missile, in the war. And it's just Keir Starmer is basically going there to re-echo what members of the Congress are saying, and also the request of the Ukrainian president. But I personally don't see a reason why Keir Starmer is in the US right now, being that there's going to be an election in the USA in 2 months, and there's going to be a change of guard in January. We need to make the same trip again to familiarize himself with the new leader, either Donald Trump or Ramallah Harris. I think he's quite new into the international political scene, and he's supposed to be observing trends, not actually having these crucial discussions right now.
So finally, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is actually accusing the West of being afraid when it comes to, providing aerial support and protection against missiles being fired by Russia. Some people will say that, Zelensky should just calm down. But do you think the West will be willing to take that risk? Of course, you've actually explained the part that it could snowball into something that, both sides might not be able to handle. But then, don't you just think Zelensky should be coy when it comes to these claims?
Yeah, I think it should calm down truly, because it's like biting a finger that is feeding him, so to speak. It's not supposed to be, in essence, speaking so tough, in a tough manner against the person that is seeking support from. They have a very crucial decision to make right now. If they decide to use these long-range missiles in Russia, it might actually escalate the war, and we might plunge into another Third World War. If they decide not to listen to happen to the threats of Putin, might be as though that they are afraid of him. So they just kind of put themselves into an unnecessary dilemma right now, and we can just wait and see what the outcome of their deliberations will be.
Okay, Bolu Michael, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. Now, let's tell you that Ukraine has returned 49 military personnel and civilians from Russian captivity. The released Ukrainian prisoners of war celebrated near the Ukraine-Belarus border as they arrived back in their home country. President Volodymyr Zelensky announced that 49 POWs had been returned from Russia, but did not clarify whether this was part of a prisoner exchange with Moscow. And still talking about Russia, the country's central bank has raised the interest rate to 19% as it warns inflation is running too high and it needs to cool the economy. The CBN governor, Elvira Nabiullina, says that inflationary pressures have not abated, adding that inflation remains above the level required to return to target next year. According to the country's statistics agency, inflation was running at an annual rate of 9.05% in August. The hike comes as Russia has faced economic headaches since launching its February 2022 Ukraine offensive.
Добрый день. Сегодня мы приняли решение повысить ключевую ставку до 19% годовых. Рост кредитования несколько замедлился, прежде всего за счет розничного сегмента. Однако инфляционное давление не ослабевает. Устойчивая инфляция остается выше той, которая требуется для возвращения к цели в следующем году. Сегодняшнее решение усилит импульс к снижению инфляции со стороны денежно-кредитной политики. Мы допускаем, что потребуется дальнейшее повышение ключевой ставки на ближайшем заседании.
Coming up after the break, hundreds rally in France in support of mass rape victim. We'll bring you details and other stories after the short timeout. With us, we now tell you that nearly 200 women and dozens of men are gathered outside an Avignon courthouse in support of Giselle Pellicot, whose husband is accused of secretly drugging her and inviting strangers to rape her in her own home for over a decade. 71-year-old Dominique Pellicot admitted to the charges against him in a trial that started on September 2, while another 50 men aged 26 to 74, including single men, married fathers and divorcees with everyday jobs, are also being tried for alleged involvement. Pellicot's trial has been adjourned to September 16 after the suspect was excused from attending over his deteriorating health.
Une entière admiration pour elle. Je trouve que c'est très courageux ce qu'elle fait. C'est grâce à elle, en fait, elle porte la voix de tellement d'enfants et de femmes et même d'hommes, parce que ça arrive aussi. Mais oui, bien sûr, je trouve qu'elle a un immense courage de pouvoir le faire comme ça, quoi, de manière ouverte.
Sur la honte qui doit changer de camp, c'est important de le répéter parce qu'effectivement, on sait ce qui se met en place quand on a été agressé sexuellement. La faute et la responsabilisation est remise sur la victime. On va aussi trouver des excuses à l'agresseur. C'est ce qu'on appelle la culture du viol. Et c'est très important de faire passer ce message que la honte doit être du côté des agresseurs.
German Chancellor Olaf Scholz claims that the German naval ships passing through the Taiwan Strait on Friday are using an international waterway. He says this is an unusual trip that is anticipated to incite Beijing's protest. Speaking during a press conference alongside Kenyan President William Ruto, Scholz said Germany's attitude towards Ukraine being allowed to use Western long-range weapons on targets inside Russia will not change.
Ansonsten gibt es zu der Passage von Schiffen nicht viel zu sagen. Das ist eine internationale Wasserstraße. Deutschland hat eine klare Entscheidung getroffen, was wir tun und was wir nicht tun. An dieser Entscheidung wird es sich nicht ändern. Und ich bitte um Verständnis, dass ich Gespräche zwischen den Chefs befreundeter Staaten, die noch gar nicht stattgefunden haben, nicht vorher kommentiere. Das wäre nicht nur gegen jeden diplomatischen Comment, es wäre auch ausgesprochen unhöflich.
Now, Belgium's federal police have showcased the results of 2 raids targeting gun runners, seizing over 100 weapons. Authorities hope this operation will help curb the rising number of shootings in the Belgian capital. Director of the federal police in Brussels, Eric Jacobs, affirmed that they will crack down on anyone posing a threat.
Une est une opération d'un trafic international d'armes multiples, donc plus de 100 armes qui étaient destinées pour le marché bruxellois, des armes produites à l'étranger hors de l'Europe. Il s'agit de ce qu'on appelle en anglais des ghost weapons, c'est-à-dire des armes sans numéro de série. En fait, souvent, il s'agit d'entreprises qui fabriquent des armes hors Europe et où des gens mafieux reproduisent ces armes sans mettre un numéro de série dessus et inondent le marché européen. Et depuis 2018-2020, au niveau de Bruxelles, les mafias se sont installées petit à petit avec beaucoup de violence qui s'en est suivie. Et par exemple, l'augmentation des activités criminelles à Bruxelles cette année a déjà donné lieu à plus de 100 fusillades, faisant quelques morts, dont des victimes innocentes. Mais on évite d'en arriver à une situation comme à Marseille. Donc là, nous avons mené plusieurs opérations, entre autres sur les entreprises qui soutenaient tous ces mafias, qui sont systématiquement fermées quand ces entreprises viennent sur Bruxelles. Nous avons aussi un bon taux de réussite au niveau des meurtres qui sont commis. Les meurtres avec auteurs inconnus sont la responsabilité de notre unité. Et là, nous avons depuis 3 ans un taux de réussite de 100%, c'est-à-dire que chaque meurtre est élucidé et les auteurs traduits devant les tribunaux. Voilà, et aujourd'hui, ça c'était ce qui nous restait, d'où viennent les armes. Évidemment, ici, on a 2 types d'opérations, mais les armes elles peuvent venir de partout. On a frappé 2 fois, mais le message qu'on veut faire passer aux criminels, si vous venez tuer ici, si vous venez faire du trafic d'armes, vous venez sur votre radar, on vous arrête.
We will also bring you updates about the Israel-Palestinian update. We tell you that in the Middle East, Spain hosted a meeting of ministers from Muslim and European countries aimed at advancing a 2-state solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict on Friday. The meeting brings together members of the Arab Islamic Contact Group for Gaza, which includes countries such as Egypt, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey, representatives of Arab and European countries, including the EU's head of diplomacy, Josep Borrell, in Madrid for discussions aimed at advancing a 2-state solution to the Israel-Palestinian war. Speaking at a press conference, Spain's Foreign Minister, José Manuel Alvarez, described the 2-state solution as the only way to ensure a just and lasting peace in the region.
La vía es clara. La aplicación de la solución de 2 estados es la única vía para garantizar una paz justa y duradera en la región a través de la coexistencia en paz y en seguridad del Estado de Palestina y del Estado de Israel. Hoy es necesario una acción firme de la comunidad internacional contra aquellos que de uno y otro lado buscan dinamitar la solución de los estados.
But I'll tell you that the remains of Esino He, the Turkish American activist who was shot dead in the occupied West Bank by Israeli soldiers, has arrived in her home country, Turkey. The 26-year-old was killed during a protest against Israel's war in Gaza. Her death raises questions of a potential regional conflict as Turkey vows to seek justice and the war's death toll continues to rise. News Central's senior international correspondent, Adeshewa Josh, has the latest from Istanbul.
Ayse Egi's remains is received by Turkish Guard honor soldiers in Istanbul, a gesture Ankara often reserves for statesmen and military heroes. It's an indication that her death is deeply personal for the government. Turkey is a staunch supporter of the Palestinian cause and a vocal critic of Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
Yargı yetkisini kullanmamız gerekiyor. Burada Ankara Cumhuriyet Başsavcılığımız bu konuda yetkili. Ve Ankara Cumhuriyet Başsavcılığımız tarafından Ayşenur Ezgi Eygi kardeşimizin şehit edilmesi, katledilmesinden sorumlu olanlarla ilgili olarak bir soruşturma başlatmış durumdayız. Bu soruşturma kapsamında ilgili
A graduate of the University of Washington, Ayse was born in Turkey in 1998, but moved shortly after to the US, where she took keen interest in political activism. Her parents say they welcome the government's investigation into her death.
Devletimiz bu keyfi cinayetin peşini bırakmadığını, soruşturma açtığını öğrendim. Çok mutlu oldum. İnşallah aynı şeyi Amerikan hükümetinden de bekliyorum. Çünkü Ayşe Amerika'ya gittiğinde 10 aylıktı.
US President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris have condemned Aisha's killing, saying Israel must do more to make sure such an event never happens again. A rhetoric that's failed to stop Israel from pulling the trigger. At least 16 Palestinians were killed in Israeli attacks on the Gaza Strip today, including 5 members of the same family in Al-Mawazi, bringing the death toll to 41,118 since the war began on October the 7th. World leaders are now in a race to rein in Israel's attack on the enclave. On Friday, Spain led a high-level meeting of several Muslim and European countries on ways to end the conflict.
Supuesto en torno a cualquier mesa en la que se hable de paz y de aplicación de dos estados, y ojalá eso es lo que queremos, que un día veamos en torno a la mesa no solamente a los que estamos aquí, sino también a Israel hablando de paz y de la aplicación de los dos estados.
It's a solution Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu rejects, suggesting Palestine's sovereignty is a threat to Israel's security, leaving regional leaders unsure of how to end the conflict, while it continues to claim many more innocent lives in the crossfire. In Istanbul, Turkey, for News Central, Adeshewa Josh.
We also tell you that the Palestinians and foreign activists rally in Beita, south of the West Bank city of Nablus, against illegal Israeli settlements have commenced. Recall that it is during one of these weekly protests that U.S.-Turkish activist Esnor Egi was allegedly shot dead by Israeli forces on September 6.
Anyone had any doubt what the message the Israeli army wanted to send by killing Aisha Noor last week? This is their message, that no resistance will be tolerated.
احنا انكسر حاجز الخوف بيننا وبينهم، لا بنعرف الخوف ولا بنعرف ولا بنخاف من اي شيء، يعني في ارضنا ووطننا، هم اللي اجوا علينا يرجعوا من عند ما اجوا.
That's all on Beyond the Continent. You can send your eyewitness report to the WhatsApp number and email on your screen. Do follow us on social media. We are at News Central TV, and you can watch us live on DSTV channel 422, Star Times channel 274, Avo TV, and YouTube. Many thanks for watching. I am Likon Onobanjo.